Welcome to FA Exclusive. I'm Atul Singh. With me is Glenn Carl, a retired CIA officer, and my co-host. Today we are going to look at the three key issues for April. We think the three issues that matter are: 1, the US intelligence leak; 2, the great balancing game in the new emerging world order; and 3, the dollar's top dog status. So let's dive straight in. The US intelligence leak. Who better than a retired CIA man to talk about it? Shoot, Glenn.
This is a difficult assignment because to get me to speak for only 20 minutes on an intelligence issue is a challenge, but I will do my best.
I'll keep the time.
Okay. A brief summary of the facts of this latest incident, which I wrote about right after it happened, and entitling my piece "A Serious Farce," with all of the possible connotations intentionally meant. Not too far from where I live, and I live in Massachusetts, a 21-year-old National Guardsman named Texeira. In fact, it's so near to where I live that I dragged my mother and my mother-in-law on an outing to see the site of where a dam no longer exists, because it's good to eliminate dams so that rivers can flow freely, and I'm a big environmentalist. And so not too far from where the dam no longer exists is where this National Guardsman was serving and comes from. And he took it upon himself to show off to his computer gaming friends by taking from his place of work in the National Guard, where he was a systems maintenance person, a computer systems maintenance fellow, hundreds of classified documents ranging from the banal and not particularly sensitive up to almost literally nation shaking, consequential types of information. And so he shared them to impress his friends on this website that he ran for war game enthusiasts, computer enthusiasts. He does not seem initially to have intended to betray his country by providing this information to a foreign state, although no counterintelligence officer will ever say that that is concluded for a long, long time. And I share that skepticism in abeyance, at least. But because the information was posted online, and at this point, several dozens of people at least had seen it, a secret shared is a secret lost. And so, of course, it immediately or quickly leaked and started to show up on Russian-run websites. And so the information has been spread around the world. It took, once this became known by the authorities, it took the FBI and the counterintelligence organs of the Department of Defense about 3 days to identify this National Guardsman named Texeira and arrest him. So this is obviously an embarrassing thing for the United States, but what does it matter? And it has some real consequences for the United States intelligence community, but also for U.S. diplomacy and relations with other states. And then perhaps, well, not most importantly, but it also tells us something quite clear about a systemic problem in the United States intelligence community and national security establishment, which is not a new discovery, but it brings to painful life the reality of this systemic ongoing problem. So what are they? So I've said why Texeira that Korsman did this. He's 21 years old, and when you see the photographs of him being detained, he clearly is a clueless. I don't know if he's arrogant and self-confident, but a clueless boy, really, who I don't think measured or appreciated at all the import of what he was, what he had done, what he was doing. Or if he did, he may have been quite arrogant, as many people who become assets, the term for a spy in the intelligence community, are. They think that rules don't apply to them because they know better than the system in which they serve or have to operate, or anyone else. I don't know that that's the case. Counterintelligence officers, or intelligence officers in general, try to assess what people's motivations are, and there's an acronym that helps us capture the essential of what will induce someone to commit treason. It's depending on definitions, it's not clear that this is treason. If treason is an intentional act to serve another state and undermine your own, it's possible, but so far that's not established. However, his motivations do fit within the acronym, which is MICE. And most people are motivated either by money or ideology, or ego, or challenge. Money, ideology, challenge, or ego. So challenge would be a professional problem, among other things. Ego is a sense of self and wanting to aggrandize oneself, and that pretty clearly seems to be the motivation of Texeira. Money not seeming to have been it, or ideology. I don't know if he knows what ideology even means. There may, however, be a secondary motivation, which would be actually ideological, not to be fairly denigrating of the fellow. Since he was detained, it has come to light that in his various social media postings and his day-to-day life, he has expressed sort of standard MAGA, which is, what is a MAGA?
Make America great again. Make America great again.
Great again, crypto-fascist set of inclinations, if ideology is too formal a term for their thoughts. So he's made racist comments, pro-gun right statements, anti-authoritarian, anti-U.S. government statements and attitudes, all of which is the classic MAGA framework, in which has led many people who have those views to take hostile acts against the United States, to view the United States as an enemy, to seek to undermine the United States or to destroy it, or not to be concerned with what the obligations one has towards the U.S. government may be. The most famous case being the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995, when someone with similar views was offended by an FBI raid, and there were reasons to be angered at the specific FBI raid that occurred at that time, which is, I don't have to go into that. And so to protest or lash out or bring down the evildoers, he blew up a federal U.S. government building in which there were hundreds of people, among whom were dozens of little school children attending daycare.
You're speaking about Timothy McVeigh, aren't you?
Timothy McVeigh.
Yeah.
In 1995.
1995.
But
he was not compromised by a foreign intelligence agency, from what we know.
He being
Timothy. It was a solo act. Yeah.
No, his motivation was ideological, and it was he was a super patriot in his view. Mm-hmm. He was trying to defend America from the evils of the American government. Mm-hmm. We don't know if Texeira is motivated by that at all, or if he's just reflexively responding to this sort of tough guy framework. But that's a possible secondary motivation. So, okay, those are the facts. Well, I can guarantee you, however, the consequences are that once this information came onto the internet, we know that the Russians have seen it and everyone else has seen it. We've all seen some of it, and they will exploit it. And so what will happen? It took 3 days, as I say, for the FBI to find Texeira. It might not take that much longer for the counterintelligence authorities in the governments that are the objects of some of this reporting to identify who the sources are that provided the information to the United States. And that will mean either, at the least, they are in a lot of trouble with their countries, or, in the case of Russia and some other countries, they'll be dead. So Texeira has, perhaps not willingly, and perhaps callously, perhaps just cluelessly, essentially signed the death warrants of a number of sources. So this is a terrible thing if you were an intelligence officer.
Yeah.
He also, that's for sources. The similar result might occur now with regard to the methods of acquiring the information. There are sources and methods, and not all sources are human. And various humans are approached using different methodologies. And a counterintelligence investigation with the information shared in hand, probably will lead to the compromise of some U.S. methods. So the damage to the United States government, foreign policy, national security establishment is significant. Very significant. That's not even touching upon the political consequences. I think the real ramifications and dangers are the ones that I said with regard to the intelligence world: sources, methods, deaths of people, compromise of ending of information channels, I'll say it. Politically is what most people talk about. Oh, how embarrassing that the United States is spying on South Korea, our close ally. This is an outrage, and South Korea, of course, will have to react. Well, there's some truth to this, but it's a secondary issue, usually with an ally, it being a compromise of this sort. Not every nation in the world spies on every other nation, but espionage is a fact of life in international relations, and allies know that their allies are interested in their secret, confidential dealings.
Wouldn't you want to know what Macron spoke to Xi? That's almost a professional necessity.
Of course, it's as they would want to know what we are saying to Ukraine unilaterally. Yeah. So this happens now. The response that we have heard in the media has been slightly not misreported, but missing part of the story. And they said, I'll take the example of South Korea, for which a lot of the attention has been paid because there were sensitive negotiations by the United States with South Korea to convince South Korea to provide munitions to Ukraine. South Korea not wanting this to be known, not wanting to do it, concerned that the United States would say that it's not going to do that, and then turn around and give munitions from South Korea to Ukraine anyway. Fine. The objections, the outrage expressed in South Korea, as always, almost always, was by the opposition to the government. The opposition said, this is an outrage, a weakening of our national security and our sovereignty. We're being abused by a foreign power and a supposed ally. The government is feckless, and we have to do something about it. This is just what happened in the United States with regard to the Great Balloon Caper. The government was trying to not have relations be damaged as it tried to manage this delicate and dangerous relationship with China. And the opposition said, look how feckless Biden is. Of course, he's senile, and that's why there's a balloon floating over Montana. The same thing happened in South Korea. It was the opposition that protested. Every interview by a government official, up to including the president and prime minister, one of which I heard just minutes before coming on the air with all of you, the government said, essentially, well, regrettable, but our relations are very important, and I'm here to talk about in Washington, our great alliance. So that's the pattern that almost always plays out. And that's what has happened in this specific instance with regard to Texeira's various leaks. Nonetheless, no state can openly accept an infringement of its sovereignty like this. And so there are always protests, and there may be a phase of chilling relations to make a point that we've caught you. You have to stop this. And for a time, in almost every instance, the perpetrating party will say, "Oh, so sorry," and then they will back off for a time, and then things revert to normal. So I think the political consequences are real, but actually secondary to the grave harm caused, which could be to the tune of billions of dollars and many lives, in the compromises of national security. Now, the systemic problem that this reveals is something that one can do something about, but we haven't, we being the United States. The U.S., because it is resource rich, and that means in personnel, trained personnel, capabilities, and money, and has a finger in every pie, tends towards elephantiasis. So I may have given the example the last time we spoke, but it's one that I frequently give when I speak in public. When I served in overseas, one country, the U.S. had several hundred people representing the United States in our embassy. The next closest embassy in size was 50, almost an order of magnitude smaller. Now, does the United States need to have 400? Do we add, is the marginal utility of those extra several hundred officers so significant that we need to do that? Possibly, but probably not. We do it because we can. After 9/11, when the World Trade Center towers came down, the conclusion was this happened because the left hand of the American intelligence community didn't know what the right was doing. And if only they had come together, we could have stopped the attack. There is truth to that, but the move then, the principle then came to be summarized in that you have a need to share information within the intelligence community, rather than you only share information if there is a need to know. The second thing that happened after 9/11 in particular, but it started under President Reagan in the 1980s when I started my career, largely driven by the Republican Party, which said that government is inefficient, private sector is much more efficient, so we're going to privatize government functions and we'll get more bang for the buck. And so they literally hired thousands upon thousands of contract employees. They are not staff employees in the military or the intelligence community, as I was, who go through, in my case, it was a couple of years of training before I was allowed to actually do anything on my own as a certified commissioned officer. And they hire contractors, much like this Texeira fellow, to do various jobs. Now, with the elephantiasis phenomenon happening at the same time, I feel pretty strongly, as do I think most of my colleagues, many of these jobs are really not critical, but because we can do them, they are done. And what happens is that they have access to classified information. Now, you can't convince me or almost anybody else that a 21-year-old doofus National Guardsman in southeastern Massachusetts needed to know the sensitive deliberations of the South Korean government with the United States or sources of the United States government in these various countries in order to do his job. He should not have had access to it. He did not have a need to know. But the combination of the increase in the number of contractors by literally dozens of thousands. No, it's more than dozens of thousands. 561,000 contractors work for the Department of Defense. 47,000 contractors work for the intelligence community. And dozens of thousands of other contractors work between those two. So we're talking about 700,000 contractors, like this fellow Texeira, with access to classified information. And even if you get things right 699,999 times out of 700,000, the system fails. And so that's what has happened. this
Glenn,
could be,
hang on a minute.
countered by reducing the number of contractors, but the pressure financially and politically, especially, largely from the Republican Party, has led to what we just have been talking about.
This elephantiasis issue, that you have so many people who basically know stuff they shouldn't, and you have so many contractors with inadequate training and perhaps not the same motivation and sense of mission, is serious. Is it being addressed? If not, why not?
There are endless efforts to address it, which endlessly fail, because when the reflexive response of an institution to a crisis is to do two things. You do a study to say, here's how it will never happen again. And then you have to show some motion if you are the person responsible. You can't just say, well, we'll try harder next time, or we won't let it happen again. You have to show, well, to fix this problem, we are doing this. And usually what that is in government terms is you create an institution. There's been a leak of information in the National Guard of Massachusetts. So now you'll create a commission to study leaks in regional commands. And it's staffed by X number of people. And you think, well, where do these people come from? At the same time as that, you have the pressure, which has lasted for truly many decades and has won the argument more often than not since President Reagan, driven by the Republican ideology of privatizing government, to say, well, okay, we can't hire a staff employee like Carl because it costs us $1 trillion to do this with all of the retirement guarantees and healthcare, this and that. We can't fire people that easily. And the contractors, we can hire them and fire them, and they cost less. And it's a spot solution to a spot problem. And so that's what happens, and it is very hard to oppose. It's possible, but generally speaking, for the 40 years that I've been involved, almost exactly 40 years, in the national security establishment, the dynamic has been to have more and more carbuncles on the ship of state.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.